Welcome to this episode of Grand Valley Magazine's Community in Motion. Hi, I'm Tony Azam. I've lived and operated a number of businesses here in the Grand Valley for nearly 25 years. So I know how important it is to support the community in motion. As a remote area 250 miles from Denver and Salt Lake City, our community has had to create our own cultural resources. The Grand Junction Symphony is in its 36th year, a testament to the talent and dedication of our community's commitment to fostering the arts in Western Colorado. On behalf of Freeway Jewelers, Freeway Bowl, and Papa Kelsey's Pizza and Subs, I'm proud to sponsor this special program, celebrating the continued success of the Grand Junction Symphony Orchestra. Thank you.
Welcome to Grand Valley Magazine's Community in Motion film and video programs by Western Colorado's talented filmmakers. This series of short films, documentaries, and special programs showcases the dynamic life, landscape, and people of Western Colorado. Grand Valley Magazine's Community in Motion film and video programs are made possible through the generous support of our sponsors. Thank you, and enjoy the show.
I guess probably somewhere around high school. I was always very interested in conducting and conducted high school ensembles when I was in school. I still felt like the cello was the means to the end, that to be a conductor in an orchestra, you should know what it's like to be in an orchestra. So playing the cello in college and so forth in orchestras gave me the insight from being on that side of the stick, as it were. It gave me the insight, which I think helped me develop, understand that psychology, I guess. Well, the easy answer is it's a job. There are about 200 conductors that make their living conducting orchestras in the United States. So it's a relatively small club. And so just getting a position is really an honor. And of course, I like a lot of outdoor activities, so this is a great place to raise our family. We really enjoyed it here, and enjoyed the musicians, enjoyed the board, enjoyed the community. So it was a place we wanted to stay. When I first arrived, the community had just gone through Black Friday or whatever it was when the Exxon shut down. It had been happening about 2 years before I got here. So the community was in a pretty depressed state. And of course, people don't have leisure dollars. The arts tend to suffer. So it was a good place to enter because there was really only one direction to go, and that was up. Having said that, it wasn't easy. The manager that was there at that time had an illness. I was here about a month. She actually died, so we had to replace her. So there were two people that were relatively new that were starting the sort of building process. The orchestra had lost about $50,000 in the last 2 preceding years, so we had a lot of building to do. But we built a great board, and the orchestra had undergone some changes too. So it took a while to establish that sort of rapport with the orchestra, but once I did that, then I think it's just been sort of a gradual increase in sort of the artistic standards, and with the increase in the artistic standards comes, the money tends to follow that. You get a more active board, and they come up with fundraising ideas, and we make more money. The budget is grown about 4 times now what it was when I first started. A lot of our musicians have had training in college. They may not be making their living in musical endeavors, but they played their instrument in college. They received college training. A lot of them, of course, are music teachers in town, District 51 or private schools. Of course, we involve a lot of the college faculty, so a lot of them do also make their living in music, whether it's teaching in the public schools or teaching college. People like Calvin Hover, Sean Flanagan, Kristen Yun, Mary Lindsay Bailey, all of these people work at the college. Public school people like Cameron Law, Troy Raper, Rachel Lavity, Isaac Lavity, they work in the public schools teaching. So you have a lot of that too. But we've also had the Woobens, who retired from being in the medical field, but he was an MD in town. We've had lawyers, we have housekeepers, realtors, a couple of realtors, Ken Height, Karen Maloney, been longtime realtors in the Valley. So I'd say it's varied, but even those who make their living doing something else in music, to play at the level that we require, had to have some training, usually at the collegiate level. Artistically, you don't always have the instruments that you need. And that's become less of a problem as the community has grown. People just, they like it here. It's a beautiful place to be, and so people will move here. But having said that, we still don't have a contrabassoonist or a contrabassoon in town. But we do have a couple of harpists in town. For a while, when we have repertoire that require harp, they would have to come in from Denver or Salt Lake City. Still, if we have a contrabassoonist, we have to bring one in from outside the community. But having the orchestra having grown to attracting other people on the Western Slope, we have people that commute from Utah, come in from Montrose area, have had people from Glenwood or Aspen come in from time to time. So having the right musicians, that's been a great partnership with also CMU, because in several cases, the person that we were lacking, they were also lacking. So we had a sort of joint venture in relocating somebody here, whether years ago that was a concertmaster, a violinist, or a principal oboe. But these instruments that great players didn't really live in the community, we've had good partnerships with the college, sometimes with the school district too, in terms of getting people that play that instrument to relocate here. So that's a major challenge. Finances are always a challenge. You know, it takes a great staff to work the behind the scenes in producing concerts. It's not just a musical endeavor. So with a great staff, there's a price that comes with that. So building a budget so that we can afford not only to pay our musicians, but to have a reasonable business staff that can do our marketing and help with fundraising events and keep track of the dollars, sell the tickets, all those sort of ancillary things have taken us some time to build. Well, right now I think we have a terrific staff. You know, a lot of people that I've met outside of music in the community said that one of the factors that they considered when they moved here was that there was an orchestra. Even if they might not be somebody who attends on a regular basis, having that commitment to an orchestra, to a university, to an art center, said something about the community. So it does factor in when people look at communities to retire in. And I think that has been a factor here. Of course, I wouldn't be in the arts if I didn't think they were important. And giving some people fulfillment, I always say that if you come to a concert and we didn't take you away from your daily routine, at least for part of that concert. And we all live such busy lives now, and we have lots of things, what our kids are doing, what our parents are doing, you know, what we're doing, our recreational activities. And so to take you away from that and give you an opportunity to sort of put that stuff aside and get bathed in some beautiful music, if we don't take you to that place at some point in that concert, then I think we failed our job. So to give you something to do that takes you away from those sort of daily routines is a very important part of this art form. Concertmaster is really second in command. I happen to be a string player, so I speak the language, but oftentimes a conductor may be a pianist. And so he may not know the sort of technical details that a string player might need to know, whether he's playing something on the string, off the string, whether it comes from the string, you know, what kind of stroke, what part of the bow you're playing in, whether you're going to play that on the A string or the D string. These sort of details sometimes need to be transmitted to the string section. And oftentimes the concertmaster will do that. And even in my case, being a string player, I'm not a violinist, I'm a cellist. And things are different. And so to have a concertmaster that says, you know, we ought to really do this here, or ask me what I want. But to be really an interpreter. Sometimes, you know, we get caught up in a gesture, and maybe that gesture isn't communicating what we want it to communicate. So to have somebody that's not afraid, whether it's a concertmaster or any of the principal players, to say, hey, I'm not sure what you really want there, to ask that question, is an important aspect of not only the concertmaster, but all of the principal players. And to have that relationship with the players where they're not intimidated to ask those questions. The old days of Toscanini, those don't exist anywhere anymore. And conductors are not that sort of tyrannical personality that you're just afraid to ask any of those questions. But the concertmaster really, it's a great relationship. We get together in doing bowings, which are sort of what strokes are done, up bow and down bow. So we make some decisions beforehand on what those bowings will be, and that affects the interpretation of the piece. So it has to be a very it's helpful if it's a close relationship, but it certainly has to be an open and respectful relationship. In general, pieces are divided into movements, and they're separated by silence. And so when you look at the program and you see these funny little Italian words, each of those represents a movement which is separated by silence. Having said that, sometimes people just can't sit on their hands, and that's just fine. And the other thing I think that happens that's interesting to me is maybe when we do a pops concert that reaches out to a different audience. Sometimes they don't know the etiquette, and they're going to applaud in the middle of a piece or between movements, which is a place where they're not supposed to applaud. But to me, that says, hey, we have some new audience members out there. We've reached out to a different segment of the audience. That's great news. And I don't think we can be terribly stuffy about that. It isn't that important. Sometimes when you have a guest artist, they're have such level of concentration that does break a little of their concentration, maybe between the first movement and the second movement, and it can affect them, but they're going to have to get over it. Predominantly, the art form is a Western art form of classical music. So whether that goes back to Bach or Mozart or Beethoven or more contemporary in terms of 20th century or 21st century composers, the art music that we do really comes from that genre. But a lot of times it's fun to do music of other styles. We just did a mariachi concert. And that was a terrific concert. Attracted a different audience for us, but it was a whole different style of music than our orchestra had ever played. And I think the musicians, as well as the audience, appreciated the fact that, hey, this was something different. So it's in a lighter vein. It's what's typically called a pops concert, but it's an alternative concert in some way, whether it's the Texas tenors that we've done in the past, or it's a jazz concert, or it's some pops artist or a country western artist. All of those attract often a different audience. Sometimes our standard classical audience, they will come to those concerts too. But it may bring somebody else who is a country western fan. And then maybe we go to that person and say, gee, we'd love to get a little support from you and wondered if you'd make a donation. Well, they just went to a concert. Now they're more familiar with the orchestra and they might be a little bit of an easier sell. It's a good question. A lot of places people dress up. I think it's hard to dress up and go to a high school auditorium. I think when the Avalon opens, and hopefully we're able to do some concerts in the Avalon, it might be a different atmosphere, and people might feel a little bit more compelled to dress up a little bit. But part of the advantage of being this community is to reach out to all sectors of the community. And some people may not feel comfortable dressing up, coming to a concert. There are some etiquette things. Turn your cell phone off. Turn your vibrator on your pager off. We used to have doctors that say, "Hey, can you leave your pager outside in the lobby, and we'll come and get you if you get paged." Kind of issues. Don't text. I mean, it may not make any noise, but you turn that light on, and somebody next to you, it bothers them. So I think those kinds of things. You can always wait to applaud till somebody else applauds, and then you probably will catch on. But that's an overrated issue. I don't think it's such a big issue. Come on time. It is disturbing to the people performing if people come and go during the performance, it just affects our concentration. You know, if you're a cellist and you're playing right here and, 10 feet away, there are some kids there. It's great that they could come, but we'd hope that they'd stay till the intermission before they have to get up and leave. If they get up and leave, it does affect it affects our concentration. And it affects people if you have to go through the aisles and people have to get up. I mean, that's a commotion that hopefully you can wait to between movements or between pieces if necessary. But usually, typically, our halves are 45 minutes or less. So you should be able to sit someplace for 45 minutes, hopefully. In the early years and at various times at Grand Junction High School, we engaged acoustical engineers to try to help us with the acoustics in the hall. And originally, that hall had an asbestos concrete ceiling. And with the removal of the asbestos, then they put in a drop ceiling, which is absorbent. And there are some axioms in acoustics in performance halls, but one of them is you need a solid, hard ceiling. And to make a difference in that, we would have had to put a double layered 5/8 sheetrock in that ceiling to get the correct acoustical bounce off of that room. And simply the trusses that support the ceiling couldn't support that weight. So we did some things that we could do in the hall in terms of, we bought some Wenger shell, we did some overhead reflectors, but it's all been sort of Band-Aid. We've done really all we can do to make that hall as good acoustically as it probably can be. And having said that, it's just not very good. I have the best seat in the house. You wouldn't believe the amount of sound that is generated on stage and how much of it gets lost in the hall. As we had a consultant came in and he said, boy, you shake the walls in this building, a lot of notes fall off because they're just absorbing all of that sound. Even musicians that may sit out a concert, they're used to the volume level and the quality of the sound on stage. They go out in the hall and say, oh, it sounds a lot different out here. So the Avalon has had its limitations too, but we have, in the design phase, been very careful, and the city has been very supportive in being mindful of what the acoustics could be. And I've been in there. Of course, it's hard to tell yet, but you can clap right now, and you get a second and a half, 2 seconds of reverberation in the hall. You do that in Grand Junction High School, it's gone immediately. And when we get seats in, get some carpet in the aisles, and get all of the material in the hall, it's going to absorb some of that. But for instance, choosing the seat is very important in its sound qualities. We wouldn't think that's important, but it is very important. You have 1,000 seats in there, and if they're 6 or 8 inches of foam, all of that absorbs the sound. So they have to be a harder seat, a more reflective seat, hopefully one that's also comfortable. It'll be much more comfortable than the old ones, I'll guarantee you. But all of those sort of acoustical properties are going to make a much difference. Having a hall that only seats 1,100, that's probably a pretty good number for us. At some point we may have to go to double performances, but right now that's somewhere around what we average in terms of a Grand Junction High School. So you're in a closer environment. You're closer to the orchestra. The size of the chamber is smaller. The acoustics are going to be better. You're going to hear more of what the orchestra actually produces in terms of its sound quality and quantity than you can hear at Grand Junction High School. Of course, probably everybody, or many people at least, have been in what was the Avalon. And the actual layout of the facility is not going to change. But the rake of the mezzanine has changed. The rake of the floor will be changed, laying new concrete there so that the sight lines will be better. And it won't be as steep on the mezzanine as it used to be. As really the nosebleed section was, pretty steep. That won't be as steep. The seating, of course, is all replaced. The layout of the seating will be different. Since the projection booth in the top has been removed, there'll be more seating. It goes further back in the top. And remember that this is only the first phase of the Avalon, and that this will do all of the audience chamber, really from the stage into the audience, but it doesn't do anything from the stage back. It gives some lobby space, place to sell tickets, place to sell wine, a much greater ambiance to the facility, but still from the stage back, both in the front and on the sides, it isn't going to be changed. So it really waits the second phase to make the stage larger. The only way it looks like, and this isn't positive for us right now, but it looks potential. The only way that we can use the facility right now is to put some temporary staging in front of the stage. And when they took out the old stage, they found that some of the stage was indeed temporary. So they have built permanent stage to where the old temporary stage was, and we'll be able to come out 6 or 8 feet in front of that with temporary staging, which gives us absolutely minimal space. We can't do a symphony chorus in there, we can't do a nutcracker in there, we can't do a Rite of Spring or a large Stravinsky work that takes very large orchestration. But we can do a Mozart symphony in there, we can do a Brahms symphony, a Tchaikovsky symphony. So we're probably where our plan is to do a certain number of concerts in there that require sort of a smaller classical or romantic orchestra in terms of size. But the stage is still going to be the Avalon stage, and it's going to still have tremendous limitations, not only for us, but for other groups that might want to come in, or a group that's a traveling theater production, and they're going to be in Salt Lake City and they're going to be in Denver, and it would be a great place to stop. Well, the stage is not going to fit their needs until we get to phase 2. It has been and continues to be a little bit of a changing platform. I think the fundraising activity has gone quite well, but if it goes better and continues to go well, then there are some things that could be finished out, which are just sort of in the rough-end phases, and that probably would be one of those. Well, one of the good things in the design of the Avalon is that there is going to be some variable acoustics. So there will be material that can come down on the sides that will then absorb the sound. And so where an acoustical instrument, one that's non-amplified, wants that reverb, wants that freshness, wants to hear the quality of that sound. In an amplified performance, they can adjust all of that with turning up the knobs. So there, they would rather have a hall that absorbs the sound, so much like Grand Junction High School, that when you make a noise, it's immediately gone, it's absorbed. If you've been into some of the churches, the big churches in town, because they do a lot of electronic music, you walk in there, it sounds like a recording studio. It's very, very dry. And that's good for electronic instruments, it's horrible for acoustical instruments. It's been a huge factor. You know, we've collaborated, I think, very well. It's met some of our personnel needs. When I first came, I think there were 3 full-time faculty. There are a dozen now, something like that. So where the university's music department needs a specialist in each of those instruments, we need those specialists too. And not only do they then, that professional comes to be our principal player, but they also are there then to nurture other players that play that instrument in the community that need maybe some of that professional instruction to help them sort of get to the next level so that they can play, you know, the second chair or the third chair in the orchestra. That remains to be seen a little bit. Without having performed, every time you change a venue, it's different for everybody. It's going to be different for the audience, it's going to be different for the musicians. But until we actually get in there and say, okay, how can we hear? Can the last chair violist, you know, hear the timpani player, hear the clarinet player? I mean, how is the cross-stage hearing? We're not going to know that till we get into the hall. And again, since very little is being done from the stage back, it's not going to have baffles. The second phase of the development has, you know, huge baffles that would surround the orchestra and a ceiling that would sort of encapsulate the sound and then gets more of that sound out into the hall. We're probably not going to have that in the first phase. We aren't going to have that in the first phase. So the question is how is it going to be? And until we get in there and in this new facility, we won't know. The orchestra won't know what it's like to play in there. nor will the audience know what it's like to hear the orchestra playing there. So that's a little bit, the computerized models help that. But again, the computerized models have to do with after the second phase, when we have all of those sort of acoustical improvements done from the stage back. So there may be some band-aids we can do, or the city can do, or we can joint venture to do to improve it, perhaps. But we'll have to see when we get in there what it's like. We just won't know until we play in there. I think one of the aspects of the Grand Junction Symphony that I hope our community appreciates is that it's a community orchestra. There are other orchestras that often will say, okay, we want the best players we can get. So we're going to import players from Salt Lake City or Denver, and their orchestra then is an orchestra of commuting musicians. And that this is probably getting to be more common than uncommon. In orchestras like the Cheyenne Symphony or the Greeley Symphony, Boulder Philharmonic, those orchestras often have the same group of musicians. That it's great for them because they can actually make a living, but they work their schedule very carefully so that that same sort of pool of musicians can play with these various orchestras. But in that sense, it's not really a community orchestra. Ours is a community orchestra, and I speak of a broader community. I would include some of eastern Utah, and certainly down to Montrose, and certainly over to Glenwood, because we are sort of the biggest orchestra between Denver and Salt Lake City. And so to have musicians that really form a Western Slope orchestra, and musicians that you might see in the grocery store, that might be your neighbors, might be your doctor, might be your lawyer, might be your daughter's school teacher. You know, that's a very important connection with the community, and I think one that I've always fostered, and hopefully that will continue to be the case with the Grand Junction Symphony, that it is a community-based orchestra. That helps the support, that helps the financial commitment from the community, that the community really feels like this is our orchestra. It's not an import orchestra, it's our orchestra. My contract requires me to live in Mesa County. I wouldn't have it any other way. I think that's important for all of our musicians to feel like they have a sense that this is their community, and the community has a sense that these are our musicians. I think that's important.